Don't go Oprah on me. That's what talk show host Stephen Colbert says mid-interview when Oprah starts asking him questions, and it throws everything off just for a second, because that's not how this is supposed to go. You know, he's the host, she's the guest, but then he pauses and he looks at her and says, do you want to switch? And without hesitation, she says, I actually would. And just like that, they switch seats. And now Oprah's interviewing him. It's playful, it's really unexpected, and it gets a laugh. But what happens a few minutes later, that's where the real takeaway is. Because the tone shifts just slightly. They're talking about audiences, what they mean, what they do, how much they matter. And then Colbert says something that doesn't sound like a comedy bit. It sounds like something he's learned the hard way. He says he needs an audience so much that if he has to make a tough phone call or have a tough conversation, like a really uncomfortable conversation, he'll have people come sit in front of him just so he can say what he actually means. Because in his words, the audience makes me do it more than I will make me do it. And that line really stood out to me. It explains much more about how people actually operate than a lot of advice ever will. Because if you're honest, you've had your version of that moment. You knew exactly what you wanted to say. You had the sentence ready. You had the tone right. You even had the timing. And then the moment came and you didn't say it. You edited it. You softened it. You went halfway. And afterward, it stayed with you longer than it should have. Not because you didn't know what to say, but because you didn't say what you actually meant. And most people respond to that the same way. They turn it into a personal flaw. Like, I need to be more confident. I need to stop overthinking. I need to just say it next time. But that's not what Colbert is saying at all. He's not trying to become someone who magically handles hard moments better. He's saying, I understand what gets me to show up in those moments. That's a different level of awareness, because most people are focused on fixing themselves. Very few people are focused on understanding themselves. And there's a big difference. Because when you understand yourself, you start noticing patterns. You start seeing that there are certain conditions where you operate at a completely different level. You show up earlier. You speak more clearly. You follow through faster, but only in specific situations, like when someone's watching, or when someone's waiting on you, or when you've said something out loud and now it feels real. But when it's just you, that same energy isn't always there. You delay, you rethink, you give yourself room to back out. So you're the same person, but it's a whole different result. So what changed? Not your ability, but the environment, the setup. And that's what Colbert figured out. He didn't sit there wishing he had more internal pressure, like who does? He created external structure. He said essentially, if I need to say something real, I'm not going to rely on willpower. I'm going to create a situation where I don't have the option to shrink. That's what the audience does. It raises the floor. It makes a certain level of performance unavoidable. And once you see that, You start looking at your own patterns differently, because there are probably things in your life right now that you keep pushing off. And it feels confusing because it's not that you can't do them. You've proven you can. You've done similar things before, just not in this exact context. So you keep asking yourself, why am I not doing this? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the better question is, what version of me actually does this? And what conditions does that version need? Because you've seen it. You've had moments where you were more direct, more focused, more decisive. You weren't a different person. You were just in a different situation. Maybe someone else was involved, or maybe it felt more immediate. Maybe there was some level of accountability, spoken or unspoken. And because of that, you didn't hesitate the same way. So trying to recreate that version of you in isolation might be the part that's not working. It's like expecting yourself to perform at your best without the conditions that usually bring that out of you. So that is not a discipline issue. It's the situation you're stepping into, and situations can be adjusted, not by pushing harder, but by setting things up differently. Instead of saying, why can't I just do this on my own? You start asking, what would make this feel real enough that I actually follow through? Do you need to say it out loud first? Do you need someone sitting across from you? Do you need a small layer of pressure, like just enough to keep you from backing out? Here's the part that most people ignore. We all respond to presence, even if it's just one other person. That's why someone can think about something for months and then act on it after just one conversation. Nothing changed about their capability. What changed was the context. The moment felt real. It wasn't just internal anymore, and that changed their behavior. That's what Colbert is tapping into. He's not pretending to be someone who always shows up perfectly. He's someone who knows, I don't always push myself, but I know what will push me. And instead of fighting that, he actually uses it. There's no ego there, no pretending, no, I should be better than this, just accuracy. And that's where this becomes useful, because once you identify your version of that audience, you can start building it into your life on purpose. Not occasionally, and not when things get urgent, but consistently. Maybe it's one person you talk things through with, or maybe it's just saying things out loud instead of keeping them inside. Maybe it's creating small moments where you're being observed, even informally. But the shift is this. You stop relying on the version of you that thinks about doing things, and you start activating the version of you that actually does them. And those are not always the same version. That's the part that connects for people, because we've been taught to believe that consistency comes from willpower. But a lot of consistency actually comes from context, from structure, from putting yourself in situations where the right action becomes easier and the wrong one becomes harder. And once you understand that, you stop waiting to feel ready. You stop trying to force yourself into a version that doesn't naturally show up in certain environments. And you start working with what's already true about you. That's when things start moving, not at once, but reliably. And that's what matters. So if there's something you've been putting off, like a conversation or a decision, something that keeps repeating in your head, instead of asking yourself why you haven't done it yet, ask, what would make this version of me actually follow through? And be honest with yourself, because the answer might not be more effort. It might just be changing the setup, adding presence, making it real, even if that just means one more chair in the room. If you're watching and you need some one-on-one conversation with me where we can flesh out what you're dealing with, join my school community. The link is in the description. And please share this video with someone who's been having the same conversation with themselves. I'll see you in the next one.